Well, I'll tell you one thing that was different that I very much appreciated on this trip to India is I mean, certainly having been to India before, I knew that there were lots and lots of temples and shrines, everywhere you go. And I knew that intellectually. And yet this time, what I noticed that I had not really noticed before was just the depth of devotion that the vast majority of people have that is kind of alien in the United States. And what I mean by that is we kind of have a culture where you go to church on Sunday and you try obviously to be good and to live your faith or your religion at home, but it's not like it is in India where it's just a natural part of the fabric of everyday life, which for me on this trip was much more noticeable, especially when we went to Varanasi. And it wasn't that I had to understand what people believe because I don't fully understand it. I mean, I've certainly read lots of books on Hinduism and different aspects of different strands of Hinduism and Buddhism. Not enough to even believe for a moment that I understand it, but I don't need to understand it to be able to see that devotion the way that it shows up in people's lives every day. The guy who looks like he works at a bank going to do his, pujas at a shrine. That really hit me on this trip in a way that I hadn't seen before. And I very, very much appreciated it. I don't know. I get that it's just Dharma, but to me, it was kind of profound just to see how much of how pervasive it was in people's lives.
I don't remember where I read this, but it was a very interesting quote that in certain places of the world, you will see that culture flows downstream from religion. And in certain places, religion flows downstream from culture. So I guess in India, what you'll see that there is a unique culture that is there for each and every state. And you will see variances of religious practices or spiritual practices adopted to that particular state. So let's say you have been to Rajasthan, and you go down south, you go further east, you will see all these different practices. They might be practicing the same faith, but they have very different ways in the way they practice the faith. And you will see a stark contrast.
Yeah. And there was a wonderful old lady who was tending a shrine in Kumbhalgarh. So, you got a big fort, you got some big buildings, and people walk up and down around the palace and the ramparts. And in the palace, they had a shrine, I think, to Shiva that was just in a little room that probably, in the palace was, some little storeroom or something. But there was a woman that was out front who was tending the shrine, and she took me into the shrine to show it to me. And I mean, the walls were completely covered with soot that probably had candles that had been going on in there for probably hundreds of years, as far as I know. I mean, it was just amazing. And she just showed me everything, showed me I think the ghee candle, and just was explaining it to me. And I had a similar experience in Pushkar at the Brahma temple, which blew my mind. I mean, I know you've been to Utah in Salt Lake City. You can't go into the temple. They don't just let people off the street. Hey, come on into the temple and, see our most holy objects. The only way you get into the temple is if you've got the credentials, you got to have like a letter from the president just to get into the temple. And in Pushkar, it was like, just take your shoes off and put them off out here, and people are kind of bringing you in and show you, here's where you can actually see, darshan. And that was mind boggling to me, just because very few religions that I can think of that they would allow you to experience their most holy place and welcome you to see that. So that was pretty amazing.
I think you see that quite a lot around Southeast Asia as well, where a lot of the Buddhist temples that we have been to, even let's say in Thailand, they have very easy access. You can just go. I think the only thing that in most cases, and this is there in India as well as in a lot of parts of Southeast Asia, is that the only restriction or the only rule that they have is that you should be modestly dressed. So they don't want people showing up in shorts and flip-flops and in tank tops at the temple. That's the only restriction that they have in most cases.
Yeah. So my only disappointment was in Udaipur. I'm trying to remember. Not Jaigarh. There's a temple that starts with a J that, when I was there the first time, had a little Ganesha shrine on the side of the wall. Very tiny. It wasn't a whole to do. It was just a little shrine that was, carved into the wall, but it was very well tended, I remember. And when my son got his wallet back, I was like, oh, I'm going to go find that Ganesha shrine and, just, go and see if it's still there. And unfortunately, that was gone. So
Oh, okay.
apparently, they told me after the pandemic that a lot of Udaipur had changed, and a lot of those little old, I guess they had renovated some of those buildings for more, for more commerce and more retail space. But I was
Yeah,
very
that's
happy
always a
with Ganesha.